Peter, let's talk a little bit now about sort of taking nutrition during a race. What should we be consuming? A lot of us may consume gel packs. We may have a mixture that is in a fluid form, particularly at the 10K, the elite level. When should we start to eat? It's about a 2-hour race, high intensity. Tell us your opinions on this.
Well, again, it really depends on the nutritional status of the athlete. So for the purpose of simplicity, maybe we should talk about an elite level athlete who, as you said, is going to complete this race in 2 hours, maybe even a little bit less. And let's assume that this person is reasonably fit, which means that they're not only cardiovascularly fit, but they're metabolically a little bit more efficient, which means that they can access both fat and glycogen. So let's assume their nutrition is right. Okay. Well, let's do the math. For someone swimming at that level on the Olympic stage, they're probably requiring about 1,200 calories per hour. So in a 2-hour race, they'll go through 2,400 calories. That's what they need to supply their energy. Now we can plus or minus that 20% depending on the size of the individual, but let's just call it that. Now think back to how much glycogen you can have in a fully loaded glycogen tank. In the muscles, you can hold probably about 1,200 calories, and in the liver, probably about another 400 calories of glycogen. So what you're asking is, you're about to set out on a voyage that requires 2,400 calories. Your liver's got 400. We want to reserve that for the brain, because remember, liver's the only organ that can extract that. The muscles have 1,200, and that's only for the muscles. So we've got a deficit. So what's the deficit? Well, the deficit, let's just call it another 1,200 calories. Let's give all that 400 to the brain so we don't ever want to run the risk of bonking. And it doesn't really work that way, but let's just for argument's sake say that. You have a 1,200 calorie deficit. Some would argue you need to ingest that 1,200 calories in a 2-hour race, or 600 calories an hour. I would argue that if you're metabolically efficient, you'll get that 1,200 calories out of fat, which implies that you're so metabolically efficient that at your anaerobic threshold, or just below it, which is where an athlete at that level will swim that intensity, you should be able to access 50% of your calories from fat, meaning going back into the fuel truck, and only have to take 50% of them from glycogen. So it's actually quite conceivable that you could swim a 2-hour race or run a 2-hour and 10-minute marathon without consuming any glycogen during the race, or glucose rather, because you were able to rely on your own internal full stores plus the fat that you carry.
Well, Peter, you know, what you're saying runs counter to the reality of what we see at the elite level. We see most swimmers, because it's been conventional wisdom, start to eat at about 45 minutes, or feed, I should say, at about 45 minutes to an hour, with gel packs, stopping off at the feed stations. Each of these, of course, slowing them in terms of their ability to make their way through the course. Tell us a little bit more about what's going on here, and what does this mean to the elite level of the sport?
Well, I mean, I think sadly it probably indicates that there's a little bit of misinformation still out there. Now, it's certainly the case that if early on into a race you're consuming gel packs, you will need to continue consuming gel packs, because when you start consuming gel packs, granted you get that 26 grams of glucose that they have in there, or whatever sugar they put in there, but you also raise insulin. So you get the immediate gratification of the glucose, but it comes at a cost, which is you've raised your insulin level, which means you've now turned off your ability to access fat. And remember, when we walked through our example a moment ago, I did acknowledge that you will need to get about half your energy, or 40% of your energy, from fat stores. But if you now turn that ability off, you have become almost entirely dependent on glucose.
So it's kind of like we're switching it on and off. Is that what you're saying, our ability to burn the fat by taking in the gel packs or other forms of glycogen, that we're actually up and down, switching a switch on and off with access to the fat stores?
Yeah, except the problem is once you switch it off, it's very hard to get it back on. And that's why, independent of any sort of keto adaptive state, which I don't think is necessarily what we're really talking about here, you can consume the right sort of carbohydrates that always keep insulin levels low, and therefore give you the best of both worlds, which is access to fat when you can use it, and access to glycogen when you need it.